So I'm Patrick Tame, and this is my good colleague,
James Winter.
We are headhunters that specialise in
Digital marketing, e-commerce, customer directors,
direct-to-consumer businesses.
direct-to-consumer businesses,
Digital.
multi-channel.
Yeah. We specialise in, what do you need? I think e-commerce is the main plank through what we do, direct-to-consumer. But yeah, okay. So what we're going to talk about today is...
It's the market. What's the market like? Because this is a question we always get asked by candidates. And so it's very useful for people who are looking for a job or have been made redundant or are,
HR directors.
And also HR directors to know what the market's like for e-commerce and digital marketing talent.
Because it's different. I've never, in 20 years of specialising in this market, I've never seen a talent market doing what it's doing at the moment, and not for the reasons you might think. So we're going to start to unpack that.
Yeah, so I think at the moment we've got, for the first time ever, a dip in e-commerce sales. So e-commerce sales have grown exponentially during COVID.
Well, hang on, let's just date this.
I'm going to put it into a bigger context in a second.
Okay, go on.
So I think people are looking back over the last 3 or 4 years and thinking, well, COVID, then a dip, and then where are we now? But actually, yeah, we need to look back way further than that. E-commerce has grown every single year since it started. So you started doing digital marketing e-commerce recruitment in 2004, so quite a long time ago, almost 20 years. And I would argue that since the iPhone came out, which was 2007, that was sort of marker in my brain as to where it really took off. And it's always grown exponentially since then. And then COVID hit and it got even better because we were all locked away at home.
Who knew that if you locked the entire population of a country in their house for 23 hours a day, shut all the shops, who knew that they would all sit and gave them free furlough money?
Yeah.
And those that were working didn't have to spend money on travel and transport and parking. Who knew that they'd all sit at home buying stuff on the internet?
Yeah. So,
but they did apparently.
Yeah, and then of course everyone. Well, you've got a slightly evil theory about this, slightly cynical theory about chief financial officers, but yeah.
Well, no, okay, no, let's tap that one. I mean, I've always thought people that work in finance are just really clever, so they've got these big brains, which is why they work in finance. And it turns out that quite a lot of them are just not that clever, because all they've been doing, it seems, is looking at last year's sales and adding a bit. So what happened was we had this huge 2020 to 2021. That was the year where we had the big growth, and then 2021 through 2022 was when it sort of slipped away. So 2020, 2021, and you can say, oh, it's easy to look back in retrospect in your comfy armchair and say, oh, well, it was a bit of a bubble, and obviously it was always going to dip away. But it was
quite obvious.
It was obvious. At the time, it was obvious. We could see quite clearly people were locked in the house. So it seems to have come as a massive shock to a lot of retailers and direct-to-consumer businesses that their e-commerce sales, for the first time ever, didn't grow year on year.
Yeah, in fact, anything digital. So it's been well reported that the whole tech industry has overhired and then has had, actually what you really hear about is the massive job losses and the downsizing going on in Silicon Valley. But actually, if you look at how much they hired in the years running up to 2022, they're really just cutting back to their normal levels. And so I think there's a misrepresentation of what's happened there.
I completely agree, and the same is true actually with e-commerce sales.
Yeah, so there's a very interesting graph of the mean line of growth for e-commerce, and you see it massively rising above that mean growth, and then it is dipped down, but it's come back to that mean growth, and in fact we're seeing some fairly strong signals now that e-commerce is back to the growth path it was on before.
Right, so if we draw a straight line from 2019 to today, it's pretty consistent, albeit a slight heartbeat up, down, in the middle.
And people are looking at the last year and going, oh my God, it's going to go down, 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 down. But
so just as they saw it going up and thought, great, this is going to continue, then when it went down, they thought, oh my God, this is going to continue.
Yeah, which is called straight line thinking, which any digital marketing person should avoid. Anyway, so that's macroeconomic theory one. Then there's the Patrick Tame musical chairs theory, or constipation theory. I think we call it the musical chairs theory.
Musical chairs.
How does this work, Patrick?
Musical chairs theory just paints a better mental picture than the constipation theory. But what we've got is, if you were in a job in March 2020, you might have been in that job for 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years, by and large, you've been really reluctant to move since, because who goes looking for a job in the middle of a pandemic with all the uncertainty and all the fear and all the... Plus, sales are going through the roof, you're earning your bonus, you're the CEO's best mate, and you're working from home, so you don't have to deal with your boss. So, by and large, not a lot of people have wanted to move. And that is now changing. And I would say we've got about probably 3 years of constipated supply ready to explode onto the market. I told you that wasn't a good mental picture. No. Another way of looking at it is everyone sat down on a chair in 2020 in the great game of the musical chairs, and the music carried on, but no one wanted to dance around the chairs. Everyone sat down. A lot of people are about to stand up. And what happens is twofold. The first thing that's happening right now is supply of talent is incredible. I've never seen so much supply of good talent. And what does that mean? It means that I phone people and they say, yeah, Patrick, I'd really like to move job. In the next year, if I haven't moved job in the next year, I'll be disappointed. So,
Can we unpack that a little bit? So why are they wanting to move jobs now? One, because they're feeling a little bit more secure. But there are other things like, if you've been stuck in the same job for 4 or 5 years, you probably haven't had that much of a pay rise. And you're seeing wage inflation, and you're thinking, well, I think it's time for me to tuck into a bit of that wage inflation. Yeah. So that's definitely moving things as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably secondary, but that's definitely part of it. I think boredom, staleness, and just the need to do the next thing. I think that is the great game of. So I think we talked about the great resignation in 2020. I think we're going to see the great shuffle round, because right now you've got a lot of pent up supply, but not a lot of demand. So supply of good talent really, for the first time in a long time, really outstripping demand. But of course, demand is coming up. And what happens when people move job? They create a vacancy. And I think we're going to see about a year from now that completely flip around the other way. And a great shuffle round as people leave their jobs. I would say as a third of the people I speak to are saying, I want to move job. A third. Imagine they all change job in the same 12-month period. All those vacancies becoming available. And this is the second point to an HR director or anyone trying to maintain a team. Retention is going to be tough. It's a good time to hire right now, but 6 months from now, you're going to increasingly find gaps appearing in your org chart, and it will be increasingly hard to find people for those gaps.
Yeah, and I think the other feature, which is something I want to make a video on later on, but it's this idea that whereas for the last 20 years maybe, performance marketing has been the standout element of digital marketing and e-commerce, and this idea that you spend £1 here and you get £3 out here, whatever your return on investment is, which obviously CFOs love because they totally get that model. That has completely changed over the last 2 or 3 years for various reasons, which we're going to do a deep dive into later on. But I think the skill set people are looking for now from a hirer's point of view is much more around that sort of total customer journey, moving out from just the acquisition performance marketing aspect from one side, from the top of the funnel into sort of that brand marketing area, and at the bottom of the funnel, beyond the funnel, that retention piece. So how are you really looking after your current customers? Is it CRM? Is it make sure their customer journey is really great? What are the things you can do to make that whole brand to payment and fulfillment journey as brilliant as possible for your customer?
And definitely
that's a different skill set, but it's very similar. And I don't think it's that different. I think it's just a different emphasis on where those skill sets lie.
I think we've definitely in the last 12 months in the centre of gravity shift from spend money to acquire customers to brakes on, let's really drive CRM, let's drive our database, drive our customer marketing. So some interesting features there. I think something you've mentioned to me in the past as well, that you've noticed people taking a lot more interest in the due diligence.
Yeah, so obviously with this sort of economic uncertainty, it's when there's always a rising tide, people are less worried about what's under the water. Whereas I think people are much more interested now in looking at a business. They might go and do a company check, something that I would never have heard of before, but they'll go and do a company check and see how the business is doing in Companies House. And they'll just generally look at the sector and go, do I believe does my gut feel that this sector is going? And what are the sectors that are doing really well at the moment?
Yeah, and you're an ex-sailor, I'm an ex-soldier, and I know it's true of us, as soldiers, we're always preparing to fight the last battle rather than the next one. And I think if you've had an experience like this, it does make you more cautious, more wary. I traded through the 2009 credit crunch, and that shaped me. I had an awful lot more cash reserves going into 2020 than a lot of my competitors and a lot of other people that perhaps didn't have that 2009 experience that I had. So I think that will be a feature for this generation.
But what sectors do you think are doing well, and what sectors aren't doing so well? What do you think candidates are interested in?
So, I mean, I could go really granular with this, because there are some, you wouldn't necessarily automatically realise this, but a lot of people got pets during lockdown, and they're going back to the office. So, funny enough, we're doing quite a lot of business with organisations involved with pets and pet care. So that's and there's lots of other examples of things that you think, oh yeah, I guess that would be true. But by and large, in terms of the big picture, 2 years ago we saw a flood of people leaving travel. And as e-commerce specialists, we work a lot with hotels and airlines and travel companies, and we saw a bit of an exodus, and people flowing into retail.
And I think we're seeing travel's doing really well.
Last 2 months, travel's been doing brilliantly.
Yeah.
I've just suddenly had the touch paper's been lit by a few of my travel clients, airlines, hotels, who are on it, and that goes all the way through that supply chain.
Great.
So summing up, James, I think we can.
So we've got a couple of macroeconomic things. The end of COVID and the uncertainty brought about by the Ukraine war, inflation, gas prices. And so there's a reversion to the mean, we think, in terms of e-commerce growth.
And I think we are there now. I think we are back on it.
Yeah. And then the second one is the musical chairs theory, where a lot of people have been sitting in their jobs for quite a long time, and that needs to unblock itself, and that will produce quite a lot of movement in the market.
Constipation, blockages and movement.
Yeah, no. It's definitely the wrong analogy. And I think candidates who are looking for something that's going to chime with what they're hearing in the papers about wage inflation, working in sectors or businesses they believe in as a strong business model, and that shift of skill sets, maybe from that sort of more performance stuff to the other aspects, which are still important, still very digital, and the sort of brand side and the retention side.
Yeah, and look, and I'd say, job seekers right now, there's a heck of a lot of competition for not a lot of jobs. Yeah. Good competition, but that's going to swing the other way once the musical chair starts.
I think, and I'm going to throw one last thing in there, which I haven't discussed, but maybe again this is another thing. But it's still a very dynamic area. This whole world of digital marketing, e-commerce. If you look at social media, I was talking to a client yesterday. They spent not very much money on a social influencer, and the next day 100 grand came in from sales. There's still a lot of money to be made out of digital, but it's moving and it's constantly changing, and that's why we love doing what we're doing, because it's such an interesting area of business to be involved in.
Yeah, I was chatting to a friend of mine that's a jeweler, and knows a number of people who are just sort of bypassing retail e-commerce and just going straight to Instagram. Anyway, conversations for another time. Well, thanks very much. We will do another one of these again soon. If you have any particular questions, post us send us a direct message or post it below, and we'll see if we can address that in a future video. Thanks very much.
Thanks.